I'm going to try and just talk instead of use the microphone, unless somebody's hard of hearing, in which case put your hand up and I'll use the mic if I need to. I'm going to start off, by the way, I also do race official stuff, so I always start on time. So my apologies for those of you that are coming in, my apologies, but we're going to start on time because I want to use the, I think we have an hour. Tell me differently. I think we have an hour. And I'm going to preach a little bit. I'm going to give you some framework. But this is supposed to be, from my point of view, you guys talking and you guys learning. And I use the term guys very generically, please. Do not be upset. Everybody. So I want to get participation from everybody while we're at it. Now, the first question, well, that's the topic, classes and fleets. You know, how to grow them and how to keep them strong. Let me tell you a little bit about me, and then I'd like to ask some questions of you guys. I've been sailing for almost 50 years, and I still can't do very well, so I got some more remedial learning to do. And you know, that's the way it goes. I've been involved in the lightning class. I've been involved in state politics, provincial politics, sailing politics, and national and international. So I've been involved and around the world. I've been very fortunate with regards to sailing. It's been absolutely wonderful for my life. I was president of the International Lightning Class for a while. I was the first non-American citizen to be the president. And I barely beat out somebody that was better than me, and she was the first female president of the Lightning Class. But I've been involved, I've been in fleets, I've been in districts, I've been in all of those kinds of things. And one of the things that I'd like to say is you know, the topic, how do you build fleets and how do you keep classes going? Well, that's a little unfair because we've been trying to do that for a century or so. We're all learning how to do it. So I don't have any magic beans that I'm going to throw out to you, and they're going to grow into feedstocks and you'll be able to climb up the clouds. But what I'd like to do is give you a framework to talk or to think about building your class or building your fleets. And you guys do have the little magic beans because you have the experience and the understanding from the classes and the fleets that you've been involved in. And if we all share, we'll all learn. So that's what my objective is today, is to get that done. So what I'd like to do is understand how many people here have been on a class, national or international executive. Just trying to get an understanding of sort of the experience levels. Okay. How many have been on national or international? Yeah. Okay. So you're understanding one side of the equation. Okay. How many people have been involved either at a state or a district or whatever level? In addition to that, okay. Okay, and that was my next question. How many people have been fleet captains in a local fleet? Okay, you guys all know more than I do. So we're going to make this work together. What we're going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk a little bit about classes versus fleets, because I think that there is a difference between classes and fleets and how you motivate them and how you deal with them and how you think about them. We're going to talk a little bit about boats, and by that I mean boat availability. I mean talking about how do you acquire, how do you make it work, etc. I'm going to talk about fleets as a separate group, and then I'm going to talk about classes as an organization and how that all works. We're going to talk about lessons learned, so I expect you guys to make comments, ask questions, and so on, and I expect you guys to pitch in and answer, because I don't have all the answers. If I had all the answers, I'd be Johnson, and I'd be making, well, I don't know if he makes lots of money, but you know, I'd have a big empire, and I'd have lots of boats out there with the Sprague name on them. I don't. Want to make sure we learn what other people do, and then I'm going to summarize it, and then if we, depending on time, we'll have more of an open dialogue. Okay, I did not invent this word, but I think it sums up me and a lot of people in this room. Anybody anybody who's been on a national or an international executive is really involved in sailing. Okay, and I applaud you for doing it, being volunteers to do it. You know, it's part of our life, and it's how we have developed. And what we are trying to do to build and grow our classes is get other people to understand that and follow it. So I think you got to keep that in the back of your mind. I think that's why you're all here. I hope you're all here for that reason. Anybody, you know, any other, you know, anything else anybody would like to add to that, you know? I think it sums it up, but, oh, yeah, wait a minute, I got a dissenter here, please. No. Henry?
No, I met my wife.
Yeah. And that's where that...
I lost my wife.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to show of hands. How many have lost their spouse through sailing? You know?
Haven't been able.
And then found the second one. Okay. Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Anyway, the Spirit Sailing Association uses that as their tagline. You know, that's how they talk about sailing. I said that there's a difference between classes and fleets. They're very similar in ways, but they do have similar drivers, but they are different beasts. I would suggest that they work together, obviously, but the fleets are where the rubber hits the road. That's the immediacy. That's what's happening next weekend, what's happening next month, what are we going to do for a party, what are we going to do? That's the fleet. The class should be thinking longer term. The class coordinates and manages. And so the people are different, the thinking is different, and you've got to understand that when you're recruiting for them or you're getting involved in them. There's a difference. Classes become the sum of the parts plus more. There's where the synergy comes in. They need different kinds of and types of thinking at different times. By the way, I will preach for a bit, but I do want you guys to talk. But does everybody understand what an elevator pitch is? 30 seconds, 90 seconds, whatever it is. You know, your life in 30 seconds or 90 seconds. Why should somebody buy your company? Why should somebody buy your product or whatever else? I believe in my heart that in order to make a class or a fleet grow, you have to have an elevator pitch for that class. So we're going to spend a couple of minutes talking about that stuff. You must understand your boat. What's good about it? You know, is it a trainer? Is it a fast performance boat? Is it a keel boat? Is it, you know, what is it? What's it all about? What's not so good? You've got to know what's not so good about it. I sail a Lightning. Our guys talk about the square bathtub with the mast. You know, and it is in some ways. I mean, it's not a 49er or anything else like that. So we don't try and sell it to people who want to buy 49ers. Understand what's not so good about it. I can tell you all the great things about it, and if you twist my arm and take me into a corner with a baseball bat, I'll tell you what's not so good about it. Other than, I do have a picture of that in one of these slides, which is the bruises that the crew will get on from hitting the jib car. But you got to know what's wrong with it, because you got to be able to sell around that. You've got to understand who the target market is. Who's going to probably want to sell it? You've got to think about all of these things about your class. You can't probably change them, but you've got to understand about them so that you can work with them, so that you can work on the positives. It's marketing. You know, why do the people that might want to sail it want to sail it? How many were at the session this morning where guys talk about leadership? Anybody? Okay. Remember, there's two basically circles. You know, what you're trying to do and what they're trying to do and so on. The only time you can influence people if there's an overlap between those concepts. Same thing here. If they don't want to sail for the reasons that your boats are there, it's a waste of time. But if you understand what they want to do and they want to do stuff, that's how you get them in. They may not. You may be into the boat because the parties are really great on Friday night. They may want to get into the boat because it's a 3-person boat or a 2-person boat or there's a local fleet or whatever. But if those things intersect, it'll work. So think about where the intersections are. Why yours versus whatever else is out there? I mean, we've got, how many new boats come out every year? 20, 30 boats? I mean, Sailing World does boat of the year, and I keep thinking, oh, I've got another competitor. And, I've been involved with the ISAF as the vice chair of the classes committee for 8 years, and we kept growing. I mean, there was 60 boats when I started, there was 120 when I was finished in terms of international classes. It just keeps growing, and I keep thinking, my God, the population's not growing as fast as these classes are, so we're in a competitive world. We have to think about that. So figure out why yours is better than the other guy, or why yours is more, and let's not say better, let's use the word appropriate, because we got to go back to the needs. So understand these things. Think about them. Work with the people in your fleet to make sure that you got that. Let's just, let's say Optimus. What would be the elevator pitch or the 20 words or whatever you think about when you say Optimus? What's their tagline? Young kids boat. Getting into training. Getting into sailing. Nobody's going to argue with that. That's what it's all about. It may be the semi-ugliest boat you're ever going to sail. It may be the wettest in 10 knots. But you know what? It's almost the biggest class in the world. Because parents get behind it because they see the value and off they go. What's a laser for? Let's say, what was a laser for 20 years ago?
Fun.
Sorry, fun. Off the beach, fun, what else?
Started out as a fin trainer.
Well, yeah, that's Bruce, yeah, okay. Fun, sorry?
It was a car topper.
Car topper. You could travel with it. You didn't have to belong to a club.
It was less complicated and it has a two-part mast.
Yeah. One design, strict one design. Every boat you bought would be the same. All that kind of good stuff. Single sail, cat rig. You could sail it. It was easy to rig. Back to the mast point. It wasn't, something hanging out the front of the Volkswagen or anything else like that. You tie all three of them together and off you go. It was very simple and straightforward. Now, what is it? Besides schizophrenic. What's the other thing?
Olympic class boat.
It's the Olympic class boat. You have the Olympic dream, your kid's a good sailor, does well in the Opti, you think about it, we're the road to the Olympics. They've got a slightly different selling point now, or elevator pitch or whatever.
It's ironic that it's an Olympic class now, because they're originally trained for an Olympic class.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, we can get into the politics of that. I can tell you about the votes and, in Edinburgh and all that stuff. But the decisions are made. It's done well. It's done very well. What's the fin for? Big guys sailing for the Olympics. Not much else. There's not too many people that cruise a fin. There are a few nuts, but there are not many. What's the 29er for?
High performance.
High performance. Right. And a trainer for the 49er, which is back to the Olympics. Okay, but that's the dream. I mean, that's part of that circle of what people are wanting. Most people know we're not going to sail in the Olympics. They're not going to sail. I qualified for the Pan American Games, but I know of the 7 boats, I will be 7th. So, that's fine. It's the joys of being a Canadian, by the way. I could get into regattas that if I were an American, I couldn't because there'd be 26 people ahead of me. But the joy of it is the Olympics are a great motivator for people. We know we're not going to get there, but we like to dream, we like to be associated. So it's very good. The Lightning, I'll answer that one for you. It originally started out as a day sailor that you could race. Then it became a racing boat, and now it's the best of both worlds. It's a family boat, but it's some of the best racing in the world. That's how we sell it.
It was also originally promoted as a home-built boat you could build in your garage.
In 1938, almost everything was home built. But yes, good point. And by the way, if you want to buy the plans, anybody, I can give you the address. We sell them for $125. But seriously, we know what we are, and we try and sell it. Sometimes it's it's a little schizophrenic, it's a family boat, etc. But we celebrate, for example, our 60th anniversary. We had 4 generations of Lightning sailors there, and that's part of our history. That's what you do. Okay, so that's the pitch. So work on it, develop it, understand it through your class or whatever. Make sure that you've got a clear idea of who you are and what you are. Get agreement as to what it is in the fleet. because that's going to drive preaching. Use the words all the time. Figure out what you're there for and advertise it. Talk about it amongst the fleet. Get people buying into it because they'll preach for it. Reinforce it into the fleet. Make it part of the ethos. Identify disciples. Find people in the fleet that understand it and have friends and can go out there and help sell it for you. Sell it to prospective sailors. Make it your mantra. Really understand what your class is about. And this is what I want you to all walk away with at the end of today, is understand your boat, what's it about, and how can you sell it? Who are the right people? Do things that reinforce it. Back to my comment of the Lightning's 60th anniversary, we gave prizes for families that sail together. We gave prizes for people that won races. We did everything in terms of doing that. So we wanted family and we wanted racing. So everything we do in the class is like that. So think about that. What can you do to reinforce it every time you do things? Whether you're running a regatta, whether you're running a social event or whatever. Think about it. Okay, so any questions on elevator pitch concepts? Okay? Now, I got a quick question. How many people had the roast beef today? Okay, you guys got way too much food, so make sure that you stay awake, please. We got chicken salad and all sorts of stuff in that one, so I'll be watching out for those of you that will raise your hands. Okay, now let's move into the fleets. Fleets are where the action is. Fleets are where the fun is, and I would suggest that's why people come. Let's talk about that in a bit. But fleets only work if you've got spark plugs and other people to work with them. The concept of spark plug is I talked with a number of classes and people that are well-known in classes. They all said what makes a class grow is a good supply of boats, a spark plug in a fleet, and that's the success. They even sell our square boats to people that would have bought maybe another kind of boat because they're spark plugs. They're keen, they're eager, they can figure out where the circles overlap. And you need a balance. You need some participants because it ain't going to be any fun if everybody's trying to run around and run like that. Okay, what brings them out? And this is one where here are some thoughts that I've got. But what I'd like to hear from you is what you think are some other things. Fun brings them out, competition brings them out. That's what we do with sailboats, sailboat racing. People do it, and I was talking with Janet Baxter, who was talking about, we were talking race committee stuff. And she said, one of the reasons people come out for race committee is because they want to be part of something that's a group. They want to meet people. They want to be part of a meaningful team. And by that means they're helping make racing good. It's the same thing with sailors. I think we're all motivated in some way. We want to be part of a team. We want to have an identity. We all live in cities or places where there's more than 500 people, and we want to be part of a recognizable group, and we get something from it. But what else? What else is important in terms of the people?
Fleet size, I think, is important. We work pretty hard to get as many boats out as possible.
Okay, fleet size, okay. Yep.
Your fleet being active, so getting those boats off the cans and out of the boatyard and actually out on the race course.
Yep. Okay. Yep, good.
I was going to say access to, but make it easy for people to sail. So,
Yep.
Nice facility.
Okay. Well, it could be a beach, but a facility that they like. Back?
Knowing there's spark plugs or other more experienced enthusiasts that are happy to teach.
Experienced teachers, okay? Okay.
Because there's an access to education.
Education, okay. By the way, if you think my writing is bad, you should see my sailing.
If we have multi-generational, we see dads coming back to sell lasers as soon as their kids got into lasers. So we've got families free 3 to 5 boats out
Yep.
in one family.
Wow,
Instantly.
that's great. Good point.
Entry-level prices.
Sorry?
Entry-level prices.
Okay.
So somebody new to the fleet that's not sure they want to stay in the fleet can get in at a lower price.
Yep.
Used boats.
Okay. Yep, we're going to talk about that. That's good. Thank you. Yep.
Something that we're doing that seems to help generate more interest and get more votes on the line is a weekly newsletter with results and rules quizzes and things like that. So somehow communicating with members and team members.
Okay? Good points, and I've got to watch when I write, because I've been pushing buttons. I think I've only got one slide too far. Sorry, let me go back. Okay, anything else that brings people out though? Let's go back to that.
Similar skill levels.
Yep. Experience, teaching, education, skill levels, equal skills. Okay.
Well, in some cases better, because you want to get better, so sailing against better people.
Yep. Okay, good point. But let's focus on the, well, that's good enough. Okay, that's a start. I think you've all hit good points. Let's talk a little bit about how we make it happen. Okay, here's, again, these are 7 things that I think are important in terms of making fun. One is you schedule events, both social and racing, so that it works for people. How many people here 30 years ago, is there anybody that old? But, you know, used to race every weekend and, for the whole weekend, and maybe 3 or 4 weekends or more a summer. How many people used to do that? Okay.
30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Okay, 40 years ago. Okay. How many people do that now? Okay, good. Okay, you guys are keen. Good. I like that. But there's a lot of people that didn't put up their hand, and the world's changed. It's one-day regattas. It's not so long. It's a different world. So figure it out. Understand what's your boat able to do, what's the kind of people you attract, and how do you fit that? Okay, the joys of SurveyMonkey. How many people know what SurveyMonkey is? Okay, great. You've probably got a couple of them to you. An absolutely wonderful tool for a fleet. It's free. You can check with what people want. You can bounce ideas off them. Stuff you can't do without having a meeting, but you can now do it by SurveyMonkey. Balance what most people want to do. Don't go for the 5149 and set up a fight in your fleet. If you get a 5149, somebody wants to do a cruise, somebody wants to do a race, or run a regatta, well, figure out how to do both of them if it's 5149. If it's 90, still think about that 10%. What can you do to help them? But think about it. Do different things. Mix it up. One of the guys, Bill Foddy, if you've ever listened to him, he basically said one of the things that his class did was they started actively bringing women into the fleet, because in the good old days, you know, it would be 95% male and 5% at best, and the 5% were usually the wives that did not want to be there but were there sailing with their husbands or whatever. And he basically started thinking, you know, we have a target-rich environment. We have lots of young, fit guys. Let's try and do things that will make it more fun for the guys to bring their girlfriends. Maybe their girlfriends will come sailing. Now, at the North Americans for that class, over a third of the people sailing are female. Number of other changes going, but in terms of do things differently, mix it up, figure out what can be done that will be of interest to people. Not necessarily something they know they want. How many people could even conceive of what an iPad could do 15 years ago? Okay, we got one guy that's probably very rich right now. He bought Apple stock. But, you know, we don't know what's coming. So try different things. And you know, somebody may not say, I want to do that, but they'll say, oh yeah, I'll try it. Do that. Think about that. Let the weaker teams win. And back to the point that was made about education, is help them. Help them come along. Potentially do fundraisers. We used to have in our fleet, we had a guy that, I swear that he was on drugs. Well, he probably was. It was the 70s and 80s. But, what he used to do is he'd say, okay, we're going to race up to that mark, and then the guy that's in first has to wait till the last one gets there, and then the top 2 guys have to sail backwards to the club. They can't turn the boat around. They have to sail backwards. And so, taught people how to do a better job, but it let the guys that weren't so good get to the front and sail away. So think about things you can do. Yeah?
Do you know that our fleet, you know, typically gets So on our fleet, we did get 15, 17 boats on the line on Sunday.
Yep.
Same guys are always winning, same guys at the back, it's been happening for years. I'm thinking about splitting it into two fleets.
Yep.
Do you know of anyone, is that a successful option? Does that work?
Yes.
Discussion, that's just like one.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, yeah, we don't do it with us, but a club further down the lake does. Can't tell perf you're doing it, but you can, the people that continually win, give them a handicap of another 2-3 seconds.
Yep. Sure, go.
Well, you know, in San Diego, we've got the Sabbath League.
Yep.
And there's not really a C fleet most of the time, people, but there's an A fleet. And what they do is, if you haven't done well enough in the A fleet for a while, then you drop down to the B fleet, and whoever wins the B fleet each year moves up to the A fleet. So there's this constant circling of the competition.
Yep. Okay, good point. Like the soccer leagues, if they get up, if they bottom of the top fleet, they drop down to the bottom one until 2 years later or whatever. Yep.
I like that idea.
We use 4 fleets, we do exactly that.
Okay.
So I like that idea, but I'm just wondering now, at the end of the season, how do you trophy? How do you
Oh,
do trophies if
you
people
do
win?
it, you do it again.
End of the season.
Okay.
So what
Okay.
we've done, I represent the Harbor 20 class. We have a very large fleet in Newport Beach.
Yep.
In fact, we have an opportunity to start these boats about 150 days a year. Right now, we've got 3 fleets, and we use this promotion model as well. You have to win twice at what we call high point events to go up, and then you get to stay for 1 year. Then you're staying there for the opportunity to stay there for another year by placing, and then you reset your clock. And this year, we've added a 3rd fleet, because last year our B fleet got so big that now we've got 3, and for the trophies, we have 3 high point perpetuals at the end of the year. You have a winner of each fleet.
So you're not moving within fleets during the year?
Oh yeah, we are, and you end up getting scored in the fleet that you were in the highest percentage amount of time of that year. But just going up is, in a lot of ways, if you can get yourself up, that's as good as,
That's
that's
better.
better than a trophy. So it works really
So
well.
there's a number of different ways of doing it, but the comment that I make is it's wonderful when you got an A and a B fleet, because you'll probably be able to attract more people. I would suggest that one of the things that has probably hurt sailing the most over the last X number of years is there are lots of alternatives now that there weren't before. So, I mean, one of the reasons I own 2 Lightnings is because one guy who basically is really good competitive guy came into our club. We happen to be a multi-sport club, so we have tennis, we got other things. So he got into the club, and within 3 years, he was playing at the city level of badminton, an individual sport, stuff like that. And he took up squash, and same thing, 3 or 4 years, he was into that, and he was at the city level, well above the club level in terms of playing. And he walked up to me one day after 7 years of sailing, and he said, you know, I got a problem. I'm going to sell the boat. I hate this thing. And the reason that I hate this thing is I can do all these things in terms of getting up to the top, but I've sailed against you and John for 7 years, and I haven't beat you more than 3 times. And this just ticks me right off. So I'm selling my boat. Now, competitive guy, wanted to be in it, smart guy. You know, he's much more athletic than I am. And stuff. He had some challenges with crew. I have challenges with crew, trust me. The concept of a pleasure sail with Sprague is an oxymoron to my crew. But, you know, he had even more problems. And it just didn't work, so he dropped out. We lose sailors that way. So you got to watch that. You got to make it fun for them. So how do we do it?
One of the things that we do in our laser fleet is we, 40 boats, first and last place are paired up after day 2. The best trophy goes to the Delta improvement for the second half of the fleet.
Excellent. Good idea.
We do one of the things like our fleet in Annapolis, the 505 fleet, they'll do whole events where they switch the skipper and crew combinations so they can spread that well in the balance. And they'll they'll mix it up every different race. And,
Super. Do you do that for sort of the club championships, or is it a separate series?
no, they do it as a separate event, just like a fun, like a learning-based event outside of the competitive series. One thing we do is one weekend in our cross-training to pair up the top and bottom person in their own team.
Yep.
And then we combine scores for that day between those 2 people for all
The better sailors usually come out worse. And everybody has a fun time.
Sounds good, okay? Quick one.
One thing we did at our club this year for our fall frostbite season, which is mostly adults, is we found out that very inexpensively, for maybe an extra like 10 or 20 bucks for the whole series, we were able to actually go out and hire some coaches.
Yep.
To actually, because a lot of the coaches weren't busy in the fall. So we had people, get to get the chance to actually get some coaching and actually start bringing up the people in the bottom half of the fleet.
Good work.
One thing that we do in our fleet, I sail Shields. That's a heavy keel boat that doesn't really matter. Doesn't have a weight limit. Doesn't really matter how many people you pile on it. If you have some like newer owners in the fleet, you can always send somebody sailing with them. You can find somebody whether or not they sail that boat, but there's always room to take another person.
Okay,
So-
great. I'm gonna move on a little bit. So and that's great. The education sounds good, and the mixing it up sounds good. Think about what you can do. Yesterday, I think, or on the first day, Gary talked about sometimes having signature events can help get people together. They can become part of a team that runs a regatta, be it a disabled sailing or an able sailor or whatever, or a charity or whatever else you want to do, or it's just a specific fundraise. I play badminton, and we have a thing. One of the guys died 40 years ago. A young guy died 40 years ago of a brain tumor and stuff. We now run the Bob Davis tournament, and what happens is it's a theme, and people get dressed up and do stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with badminton, and the pairing gets done, but it's fun. Think about things you can do in your fleet or whatever that can help build people together, bring people together, help them make part of a team and do something. The other thing is, I talked about the surveying. You can use the surveying in terms of finding out what people want to do, but you can also figure out how many people are sailing together with families or whatever, and you can set some goals and say, okay, as a fleet, we've got lots of families, but we want to bring families together, because if you keep the family together, they'll sail together. If you have people in the family just doing stuff on their own, eventually they'll move out of the fleet. So set some goals. Have some numbers. Say, we had 5 boats on the club championships last year that had family members in it. What we're going to do is we want 8. So what can we do to do that? Okay, do we give a trophy for that? Think about things that you can do. I think we've gone through most of the questions. By the way, the question marks at the bottom mean I really, really, really want you to interject. So how do we make it happen? I talked about scheduling appropriately. Figure out whether you should be doing one-day regattas or 2. Figure out how can we, maybe we've had a really good couple of weeks and everybody's keen, so let's have a Tuesday night race that we didn't plan on the schedule. Be spontaneous. Get people involved in doing things differently. Try different courses. Don't just do the Windward Lord. Don't just do the Triangle or whatever. Think about these things from a fleet point of view. What can you do differently? Challenge the fleets that are within 100 miles of it. Have a regatta, do a home and away kind of thing. Think about that. What else can we do to make the competition better and more fun? Anything else?
And this touches a little bit on competition within the fleet.
Yep.
We happen to have a junior program, which means we have some teenagers. We also have instructors, some of whom are college sailing team kids. And we try and bring them onto the boats. And
Yep.
to the point of a guy who gave up his lightning, if you say, hey, well, I'll get this kid a shot from the college to be your foredeck, that sort of thing.
Okay.
It can help.
Okay.
Help pick up that person's.
So basically help crew bank. Set up a crew bank or a way to get people to crew. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Well, we're hoping to sponsor a sort of junior, quote, under 30 championship within the national event this year. And this is sponsoring both
30.
people who have actually made some effort to qualify for this and
Good.
and a commitment to training.
Okay, good. Yep.
We have a fleet of larger boats, Cadillac 37, and the boats are charterable for the most part, and that makes them available to people who ordinarily wouldn't want to spend that kind of money owning a boat that
ideas on that. Anything else in terms of competition that people have thought about or, want to mention? Okay. How do we find people? I mean, here's the standard list of where you're going to go. But what I'd like to do at the end is brainstorm some other ideas that we can pass on to everybody. I mean, obviously you go and try and get your friends to come sailing with you. Those of us that don't have any friends, it's a little tough, so I go down to the second line and go to sailing schools. If you're at a club that's got a sailing school, figure out how to get the sailing instructors to give you some of the people. They're not necessarily just the best. One of the talks today, in fact it was the psychologist yesterday, in his talk said, the people that are good at 12 years old aren't necessarily good at 18 years old, and vice versa. So look at it as just an opportunity to get them into sailing for life. They may not have to be the greatest crew in the world, and you can always bring in somebody else and try it. Go mine the sailing schools. Do a little bit of headhunting. I'm in the headhunting business. I have no compunction about phoning up people from companies that are not my client and saying, hey, are you interested in changing jobs or something like that. Same thing in the fleet. Sometimes they're not happy. You may make a few enemies. That's life. If they want to move, that's their decision. Yes, sir.
On the sailing schools thing, we have a college program, sailing school over in Mission Bay.
Yeah.
The Mission Bay Aquatic Center.
Yeah.
They run training courses through the center, but unless you're a member of the faculty zone, you can't just rent there.
Yeah.
So one of the things we have with our club is that at the end of the season, around about September, October, we get a flood of newly graduated students from this group to our club because they suddenly find out that they've done all this sailing all summer. Now they can't get a boat anymore.
Yeah.
So then they come to us.
Okay. And that's great. I mean, sailing schools are wonderful. I mean, we've got a group called the Outer Harbor Club in Toronto, and they've got about 1,000 members. They, by the way, on a Friday night will get 60 boats, 60 albacore out for a Friday night race, which is pretty incredible because Toronto doesn't have very good wind Friday nights usually. And they have something like a 40% turnover because a lot of people just come in to learn how to sail and decide they don't want to get wet, they don't want to, do all that kind of stuff. But they've been wonderful in terms of getting crew. I mean, we've gone and headhunted them all the time. So that's the sailing school and headhunting. Non-sailors. Depending on the kind of boat you got, go out and hit up non-sailors. Find people from work, find friends that haven't tried it. Given the emphasis on bars that Gary and everybody seem to be talking about, I guess that's a fair game place too. But non-sailors are pretty good because most advertising that has anything to do with anything that's going to be near water shows sailboats in the background. We have one of the best images in the world. People want to sail even if they've never sailed. So don't take them out on Saturday morning when it's pouring rain and 20 knots. People will do that. Yeah, what's wrong? This is great fun. We're getting wet. Bring them into it slowly. But think about what else can we do to get people in?
Underwater sports.
Good point.
We're looking at SUPs and also the outriggers. We need them involved.
Okay. Okay, they've already shown a tendency for masochism and they like water, so that's good. But what else? Any other things? Any thoughts people have got? Yep.
Any sport that's equipment intensive often brings the same personality.
Okay.
I have a guy that just came to me, ex-car racer.
Yeah.
He likes equipment.
Likes tinkering.
He likes
Perfect.
No, it's not tinkering, he just likes equipment.
Okay.
Doesn't want to run, he wants to be in a vehicle.
Okay. Good. There's another element to that, and that's team. And I made the comment about my friend Brian who sold me the boat. He was an individual. Find people that are involved in teams. I think it'll make a difference for you. Unless you're in the laser fleet. But think about that. Anything else anybody wants to add? Yep.
We run I'm at a yacht club in Connecticut that I think my understanding is it can be a little intimidating for people who don't know how to start,
Yep.
how to connect with the club. So we will do a one-day, it's just a one-day, probably not enough, but it's an easy way to introduce yourself. We do a one-day training program for the boat.
Yep.
And it's just, classroom in the morning, on the water in the afternoon. We promote it locally in the paper. And we get a lot of people coming in that we didn't know was there and they didn't know how to start.
common denominator is outdoor sports people.
Yeah.
I find an incredible connection between skiers, hikers, and sailors.
So are there water
But a
and
connection-
outdoor?
Yeah, the gentleman over here that talked about mechanized, somebody that's into the the car racing.
Yep.
Or the car thing is one bit, but maybe even a lower level with the ski technology and sailing technology connected a little bit.
Okay.
I've been really lucky working with one of the local colleges and their sailing teams in Pilgrimton, and same as the sailing schools.
Yeah.
But the great thing is that continues through the years because they stay in touch with their alumni. The other thing around here that's been really good is Navy kids. Getting some of the Navy kids, now they're not around, I mean, leaving a year or two, but they usually bring in a few more friends and a few more friends.
Good idea.
It's really good on the big boats where you don't have to know as much and we just need a grinder for a day and then move on.
You
If they
need
want to,
strength, not necessarily brains.
if they want to, they stick around. If
Yep.
they don't, they don't.
Super, good point.
We're doing this year a one-on-one series at the club and invite anyone, and instead of just going to the club and having dinner or bringing pop-up, whatever, we have a 30-minute how to splice, how to do knots,
Great.
how to fix fiberglass, built into inviting community people to come over to us and be more than just.
Super. Good idea. Okay.
This is where we're looking to build our membership in our boats.
Yep.
We typically have somewhere between 50 and 75 boats out on a Wednesday night. And we want to get back up to 75 or greater and build our membership. We're not a yacht club. We have no holdings of any type. We are a racing body for all the clubs in the area.
Yep.
So all their members are our members. We have members who want nothing to do with yacht clubs. They want to race against it. So this past year we did a program, all experimental, where we did a Discover Sail.
Yep.
It's a 5-weekend deal, and they had to be members of the club. And we had a meeting like this when they came in. They could sign up on the internet. In 10 minutes, we signed up 54 people.
Wow.
We took them through the 5-week period, and of the 55 people, 38 found permanent spots on boats as a group. We're doing it again this year. We haven't promoted it. We've already got 26 people signed up. So we're taking it further, and we're now going after the cruisers. We're doing a learn to race, where they have to supply their own boat, their own crew, put a mentor on the boat for 3 weekends, and basically go over the basics of a start line, grounding marks, whatever, hoping that those boats will then join our fleet.
Yep.
The people that have gone through the Discover Sailing, we're looking at it's going to be as big this year as it was last year, considering we haven't promoted it at our side of the path. We're going to put a seminar on at some point during the summer of what it takes to co-own a boat. And many people can't afford a boat on their own, so we're going to do a seminar with these people that have gone through the program. You might meet people that you like,
Good idea.
get together, pool your money and buy a boat. So we're growing our membership. We're bringing many people into the program that have never sailed, that are now sailors.
Super.
Building membership and building boats. We just sat around, we're saying, it's amazing how many people you talk to have never seen the city from the water.
Yeah. Good point. I mean, it's one of the things that always surprises me. I mean, most of us are a little spoiled with regards to the city from the water or the view from the water. A lot of people that, it's pretty magic. I mean, it's still magic after 50 years to me, to be honest. So it's a thing to take people up to try. Thank you. I'll go there.
During the summer months, in Newport Harbor, we race these things 5 nights a week, but one of the most successful things that happened the last 2 years is the Newport Harbor Yacht Club. They said, introduction, learn how to sail. And people can just come down there on a Wednesday night, and they have sometimes 30 people show up on the dock, and the Harbor 20s will be there. You put between 1 and 6 people on it, jump on, and they're all day sailing around the harbor, seeing the racing going on at the same time.
So as spectators, in effect.
That's what sells our thing, is because you can't go to the harbor without seeing 1 or up to 40 any day of the year.
Super. Great. Okay. Good idea. Thank you.
We started a women's only group, and it brought a lot of people who were intimidated or didn't
too often call them cult.
Sub-cult and the sailors cult. Sounds good, sounds good. Good idea. And that works back to the whole target of, you know, what's your boat appropriate for, what's your fleet for, and who do you want to get in. Okay. How do we build a group? How do we make them feel belong? I think we've sort of covered that pretty well, unless anybody's got something they want to add. I think that one's done well. Boats. You talked about, you know, ownership and so on and so forth. If you got a fleet, make sure you're on good terms with your builder. Or the builders, so that, you know, if you get a hot prospect or somebody's getting really better in the fleet and you want them to sell their boat so that it goes to somebody else and they get a new one and they go faster, know who the builders are, because sometimes it's tough to get a boat in the middle of July. And, you know, if you've got deals going, that's good. Other owners, always make sure that you got somebody in your fleet that your spark plug or you know is willing to sell their boat. That's absolutely critical. You've got to make it available. You've got to make boats available internally. So work on Joe, who's got a boat and he's not sailing it as much, or he wants to upgrade, or his business is taking him away a lot. Can he lend his boat out? Can he do something like that? Depending on the kind of boat, obviously, but think about that. Have scouts. You know, have people looking around. Where's another boat at another fleet that we might be able to get if we need it? The J22 class in Toronto has grown fairly substantially by doing that. They've gone out and raided Rochester, they've gone down to Annapolis, they've got a guy that literally spends his time trawling the internet, knowing what boats are available, so when somebody starts talking about buying a boat, he can help them do it. So set up that. Have some club-owned boats. The world is changing. Both the clubs that I've been involved with recently a lot now have, in effect, community boats. They've set up a match race fleet and it's club-owned boats. They've set up, they've got a couple of boats that are for juniors only, and you know they're good boats. It's not junkers. It's not somebody trying to get a tax receipt. They're real boats and they're maintained. So think about that. That is, I think, the new model. And I talked about that other Harbor club group of clubs that gets 60 boats out on a Friday night. Of those 60 boats, 50 of them are club-owned. And that is absolutely wonderful for sale. Absolutely wonderful. So think about what you can do. The other one is find a sugar daddy. You know, I say this facetiously, but usually in any fleet or any grouping, there's going to be somebody that can afford to say, I'm not going to use my boat this year, you know, you guys use it. Or, I don't know if any of you know a guy named Crick Curry. He lived in Memphis, I think it was. And he used to have a 5-car garage. And I think he only owned 2 cars, but he owned about 4 boats. And he was constantly refurbishing boats and selling them for what he paid for them. And he just, you know, he was just a great guy. Every fleet, if you can find somebody like that, that's absolutely wonderful. We get lucky to get it. Any other boat supply issues? Any other solutions anybody's got?
If you sail on a location where people are watching and it's a dock,
Yep.
let someone in your boat for a race. Just get someone who doesn't normally sail in the fleet. Just, I don't know, off my boat, go for a sail. Pat's got a lot of people in charge.
Okay.
And just like you said earlier with the scouring the country for other available boats, we've done before in Annapolis with the B-15, because whenever there's boats for sale, we have a database of it. So when we're talking to people, like, well, I know these 5 boats are available, here's where they are, here's the contact information.
Great. Please go. Good point. Okay.
Maintain sort of your, just like you want to go out and raid other fleets to bring boats, protect your fleet. So if you have people, you know, maybe you know somebody's moving away, they're changing jobs, they're getting divorced, whatever reason they might be having to sell a boat, they're buying a bigger boat, you know, either have somebody lined up or have, you know, maybe the other owners just chip in and buy it to hang on to it, to keep your fleet from diminishing.
Yeah. Gotta watch it. Yeah. Good point. I mean, we can lose boats. Sorry.
I know a couple of fleets in Mission Bay have done where the fleet themselves have bought a couple of the older boats.
Yep.
And you can kind of enter the fleet as they let you use that boat for a while. And
Yep.
they'll get your own boat.
In
They'll help you
effect,
find a new one.
a semi-club boat, but then hopefully they'll buy one.
Well, it's completely fleet owned in this case.
Okay. All right. Okay. let me go on. Classes. Let's move away from the fleet, and let me tell you what this is me thinking. This is me as an observer of various classes over the years, in terms of what I think is maybe the difference in terms of how you grow and what you do slightly differently. You need the fleet. You cannot grow a class without growing fleets. End of story. You've got to get more sailors out there, and that's where, as I say, the rubber meets the road. I tried thinking of the concept of how does the boat hit the water, but it just didn't work. So rubber meets the road. That's the fleet level. Classes grow and fleets grow. Classes make and manage the class rules. I'm a bit of a rule boffin. I'm involved in measuring and all that kind of stuff, and I'm involved in race management, so I read the rules. And it's absolutely critical that the class does a good job, because if the class does a bad job on the rules and writes rules that are ambiguous, et cetera, you'll have problems, because you get people fighting because they think the rules mean this, they think the rules mean that, whatever, and it causes you trouble. So the classes make and manage the class rules, and it's critical. There's a different kind of spark plug. You still need the same kind of energy, you still need the same kind of organizational skills from the spark plugs, but they have to think longer term. Sometimes spark plugs burn out at the fleet, so you've got to keep replacing them. But at the class level, you need people that are in it for the 5 years. They've almost got to commit it. You bring them on, and the reason for that is that classes don't do things quickly normally. And classes you've got to understand the history and all of that kind of stuff to make things happen properly. So classes coordinate races and social events, not on the local level, but on the national level. The national regattas, the district regattas, whatever. So they have to think differently, and they have to communicate differently. They have to educate by taking the best practices from the fleets and moving them back down to the other fleets. That's part of their role. It's an education, cross-pollinization, and it's a communication role. Anything else anybody wants to add to that in terms of what they have to think about?
Your problem is that in the one class of the victory class,
Yeah.
there's such a good dead class, so they
Yeah.
So in order to grow fleets, people have to scour the country looking for boats in barns and backyards.
Yep.
And getting them out.
Yep. And that's a part of a class thing. I mean, I'm going to be running the Shark North Americans. They haven't built a new Shark in 35 years. We have 65 boats apparently registered. I mean, that's mind-boggling to me, but they do it. So, that's what the classes coordinate. It's partly fleet, but it's classes organized. That's a good point. Sorry, you.
Oh, we sell older tickets, and there's only one builder. We're thinking our fleet, commissioning one for. What do you say? About making a mold for the Seagull.
Yeah.
So it's something they were considering.
The class may buy the molds. There's a number of classes that are still doing that.
Well, the Asian class did just that.
Yeah.
They bought molds when Drummond went bankrupt.
Yeah.
And they got a builder that builds boats now. And it also keeps the value of the fleet.
Yeah.
Valuation is $39,000.
So, but back to your point, the class sometimes has to take over the building and guarantee this, and it has to do the selling for the boats, etc. Okay, some class watch-outs. Here's some lessons that I have observed. You need different skills and time frames. So the person that's the absolute great spark plug at the fleet isn't necessarily the guy you want the president of your class. Think about it when you're involved in it. Be careful of the Peter principle. Back to my point, somebody is a good vice commodore or does a really good job of running the North Americans or whatever, but can't organize an international or has problems dealing with people at that kind of level. Analyze and understand the class. Look at the statistics. Where's your growth? What's your market share? Who are you? It takes the thinking that you do for the elevator pitch and takes it one level higher. The class has got to be the people that understand the history of the class, the numbers of the class, the good part of the class. It's got to be democratic and transparent. There's nothing worse, especially in the world of internet and everything else, if it's run by 3 people and they don't communicate with everybody. So make sure it's open and then you have good, valued discussions and good selling of ideas. Try and avoid the politics of the bad taste. One of the really good things about sailing is it's a sport for life. I started as a 12-year-old, I can still sail, it's absolutely wonderful. The problem is I still remember the jerk from Thunder Bay that took me out of the water when I was 13 years old. And you gotta watch that, because you remember it. So play down the politics, think of the ideas, think of the stuff that's coming from the person, not the person saying it. And make sure that happens at your class level. Because the guys from Winnipeg remember the, well, Minnesota equivalent, so the guys from Minnesota don't like the guys from Connecticut, you know? That's the way the world works, you gotta work around it. So politics are an important part of it. Get somebody who can understand that when you're involved in class. Watch out for it. Don't get overextended. Don't get some people with 5 people on the executive with 5 great ideas, and they just don't have the manpower to get it done. Because we're all volunteers. The guy that says, I'm going to rewrite the class rules and I'll have it done in 3 months, you know it is not going to happen. And by the way, if he does do it in 6 months, it's going to take another 6 months for everybody to pile on him and make changes. So don't promise things that you can't deliver. Watch out for it. I made the comment about bad or fuzzy rules. Absolutely kills classes. I've watched classes go from non-Olympic to Olympic with fuzzy rules, and it almost kills the class. Got to watch out for that. Yep.
Also watch out for your class measures, make sure that they don't mess up, because I know that the Snipe League in the mid-80s, the class measurer didn't allow a series of votes from a certain builder to get.
Wasn't exactly democratic and transparent. How's that? We'll leave it at that. Yeah, everybody's had those challenges. So watch out for it. Those are watch outs. Okay. Things only a class organization can do, change the specs or rules. So don't let the fleets do too much experimentation. They can do a boat grant. I don't know if the lighting class does a boat grant. We have 4 boats, new boats every year that get given to kids that we want to bring into the class. And so it's, they got to apply by resume, and there's a committee that does it and mentors them and stuff like that. It was only done because a couple of people in the class got into that.
How do you administer that?
I'll talk to you about that offline. I'm going to run out of time. I'm speaking really quickly right now, you may have noticed.
I mean, those full ownership or just to use?
No, they got to use them for a year.
Yeah.
Brand new boats. The builders, 2 of the builders gave new boats. And then people trained them and supplied trailers and sails and all that kind of stuff. For example, we organize shipments. We send boats to Europe. So from the builder, we help subsidize that. That's part of the price of being an international class. So, whatever else you guys can do. I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to forget that little question mark. I really like your opinion, but I don't have time to ask for it. What else? We're going to have to do that at the end, or later. Change. If you're going to run a successful fleet or a successful class, you're going to have to do something different next year than you did last year. People change. Think about it. It's, there's the saying is, everybody loves change as long as it jingles. That's pretty true in sailboats. We're all pretty conservative in a pile of ways. So, but you have to change. You have to grow. You have to change your race formats. You have to change your social events. You might have to change the boat itself. Those of you that sailed Lightnings 30 years ago always had a really big bruise right across the back because it had a nice, really square edge. Pain in the butt end, literally. We rolled the decks, made all the difference in the world. Sold a whole pile of new boats. Changed the masts, sold more boats. Went to fiberglass, sold more boats. Change is a good thing as long as it doesn't obsolete everybody else. Gotta watch it. So, change for a good reason. Understand why you're changing. I'll give you another example. Lightning class went from triangle races to windward lures. Is that a big change? That's a race format change. Do you know what it did? It changed the average weight of the boat crew, from about 550 pounds to about 425 pounds. You know what that did? That brought in a lot more women. Because some of us are getting a little big at the back, and I got to go for a light crew. I can sail with a light crew on windward lure. Who's the best people to get? Kids or women? So, it changes the makeup of the class. So think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and think about the unintended consequences. But change. Think it through, but don't do it without thinking it through. And we can talk about horror stories of things that have happened, but we won't. Always always ask questions. If you're going to grow your fleet or your class, you've got to be constantly questioning what you're doing. You've got to say, what are we doing well? What are we not? What are we doing not so well and we need to improve? And what do we need to stop doing? And it's amazing that if you analyze what you're doing, and you do surveys of your people after regattas and so on and so forth, you'll get the answers to these things and you work through them. But think about them all the time. Change is your friend. Even if you're in the one design class, change is your friend. Just make sure you do it right. In summary, know what your boat is, what it's good for, what it's not good for. Cultivate all the sailors or potential sailors that you can. Try and find people that overlap with your needs and your wants and your aspirations. Make it fun. That's why we do things. Help people contribute. They want to contribute. They want to do things. They want to be part of a group. Make it successful for them. Work together. Even if the guy is a pain in the butt end in terms of asking all sorts of questions or doing things wrong half the time, the other half of the time he's doing things right. They're volunteers. Learn to work with them. Use them as best you can and grow the organization, because there is an overlap, and make some changes as needed. Those would be my summary comments. And now I'll go into the speech. At the end, please fill out questionnaires. We want to understand what we're doing right or doing wrong, so that when the next leadership forum we do, we've got a good understanding of that. If any of you ever have any questions, you don't have the slide up. My email is simple. It's my last name, Sprague, @rogers.com. Rogers is R-O-G-E-R-S, or ask the organizers, they'll tell you. If you got questions, you need to make a contact with another class or something, if you want to bounce an idea off, please get a hold of me.
S-P-R-A-G-U-E.
S-P-R-A-G-U-E @Rogers, R-O-G-E-R-S.com. And I'll be glad to talk to you and help you out in any way you can.